This book should make you sick to your stomach, should make you want to scrub your brain clean, should make you want to abandon society as a whole, and you will never be able to look at people you pass on the street the same way. But reading it will eventually result in you becoming a better person. Let me tell you why. Lullabies for Little Criminals explores the life of Baby, no last name, a 12-ish-year-old girl bouncing between various cheap hotels, crummy apartments, foster homes in the sticks, and an eccentric juvenile facility. Struggling with the untimely death of her mother, her young father, Jules, battles his on and off addiction to heroin, dragging Baby along on his latest get-rich-quick scheme and exposing her to the seedy underbelly of downtown Montreal. Baby trudges through life as the ultimate outcast, finding herself in just about every unfortunate circumstance imaginable. Misfortune and a terrible streak of luck collide when Baby meets Alphonse, the local cool guy pimp who is determined to charm Baby with lavish gifts as an effort to buy her innocent affection. When her usually unshakable bond with Jules begins to weaken, and Alphonse starts hinting that he would like Baby to become one of his working girls, Baby enters the lowest point of her life so far, unsure of whether she will be able to escape what is seemingly written in the stars. Throughout this story, you will experience a spectrum of emotions that is so broad that you can barely predict what you will feel next. Reading about Baby's best memories with her dad, who doubles as her best friend, and all of a sudden you're being plunged into the abyss that is heroin addiction. Written as a relative chronology of Baby's memories, closer related to a collection of short stories than your traditional novel, this book flips the traditional structure of most reading material on its head. The remarkable part is that the reader's ability to follow the narrative is never sacrificed to satisfy the author's itch to be creatively exotic. Lullabies for Little Criminals ensnares its reader within the overactive imagination of a perpetually lonely child trying anything to entertain herself. Births from the mind of Heather O'Neill, a Canadian novelist and poet. Shockingly, Lullabies for Little Criminals was O'Neill's first true novel and remains her most well-known. Based heavily on the author's own turbulent childhood, this novel's authenticity exposes just how close Heather is to its subject matter. Whether or not you are able to relate to any of Baby's experiences, I sincerely hope for your sake that you cannot. By the end of this novel, you will feel an undeniable connection to her. Don't be alarmed if you have the urge to jump into the story yourself to set everything right, to save Baby from every evil person hiding around the next corner, or maybe you'll even feel inspired by her badass attitude and endearing sense of humor. You'll wish you were as cool as her. Heather O'Neill has an ability to sculpt Baby's mind into something that is always trying to entertain the rest of the consciousness from the reality of her life. She will make metaphors and symbols out of trash flowing down the street, of the way a piece of gum gets stuck to her shoe, and will challenge you to find immense beauty in the things that you may otherwise take for granted or even detest. The serious content within this novel can sometimes be difficult to stomach, and there are times when Baby's experiences, however briefly described, will leave you with a sinking feeling, and you may have to put the book down and take a walk. I won't lie and say that this is emotionally an easy read, or that the ending is so amazing and beautiful that all of the terrible stuff is worth crawling through. Don't be mistaken. This book does not want to inspire you, and does not care how uncomfortable you get. It does not beg to be understood. Heather O'Neill appeals to people who are brave enough to, for a brief time, ruin their lives in the name of learning about the life of a girl on the street. Although this book does a great job of building its own world, and much of its content comes straight from the author's vivid imagination, it is necessary to address the grave truth. The Baby's story is not even close to an impossible circumstance. Approximately 80% of sex workers in Canada began as minors, and the average age of prostitution in Canada is 14 years old. Within Quebec itself, no doubt what inspired O'Neill's narrative, more than a third of those working as prostitutes are underage. I should note that this number should be considered on the conservative side, as much of the industry operates in secrecy and revolves around remaining hidden from the authorities. Montreal especially has been classified as a quote-unquote hot spot for the sexual exploitation of children. Credited to the amount of sex tourism, gang activity, and a lack of housing in the area, this exploitation is a result of all the aforementioned factors combined in different concentrations for every child who finds themselves under the control of a pimp. In an article from the official Quebec database, they describe the trap that is often set by those who control the sex work industry. Quote, quote, "These young people often end up under the control of a pimp or pimp-like agency that takes away most of their earnings and victimizes them," end quote. Similarly to Baby's experience, many young people who are exploited within the industry are also struggling with additional trauma, poverty, abuse, and addiction. It is not unusual to see a pimp involving drugs and illegal substances amidst their relationship workers. This creates another plane on which they are able to manipulate and control the working environment to get what they want. This situation is reflected in Baby's relationship with pimp Alphonse, who used heroin to ensnare Baby into working for him in return for a cut of the junk. Though the main theme of this novel involves child exploitation, a threat of child abuse at the hands of parents often unequipped to raise a child carries through as well. Within Montreal alone, there is an alarming amount of children being sent to foster care when removed from dangerous households. In an article from Montreal City News, Director of Youth Protection Linda C. said, "There's been an increase 114% over the last 10 years of children going into youth protection." Baby's experiences of neglect and physical abuse at the hands of her father, as well as those of almost all the kids she meets in her community, prove just how commonplace abuse can be within impoverished and vulnerable communities. In a world that likes to hide the difficult and ugly aspects of our society from view to maintain a facade of respectability and normalcy, Lullabies from Little Criminals breaks through that curtain. By pulling back the shroud, this novel reveals the reality of a young girl being exploited by a community who will not only victimize her but punish her for being a victim. As I mentioned, this book is a struggle, and it is probably easier to just think about reading Lullabies for Little Criminals, to tell yourself you'd read it if you had free time. I challenge you to ignore that urge, and instead immerse yourself into Baby's world. Feel what she feels, empathize with her, and forgive her terrible decisions. It is ultra rare for a novel to have the ability to simultaneously reduce your faith in humanity while restoring your belief in the insurmountable power of a young girl's spirit to carry on through the worst of times. This book will completely change your perception of the generational impacts of substance abuse, blur the lines between right and wrong, and may even, hopefully, rewrite the definition you have of the words brave, strong, and resilient. The value of Lullabies for Little Criminals surpasses just a well-written novel and becomes almost a textbook to further your education, especially on the topic of child prostitution and exploitation, and how these things strip a child of their innocence. While I can't be sure that any of you have not experienced similar situations, the fact remains that this story will show you a perspective of the world that is extremely unfamiliar. Reading Lullabies for Little Criminals from a relatively privileged perspective exposed me to a lifestyle that I had no prior knowledge of. It pushed me out of my comfort zone, and that was where I learned the most. I hope that you can experience the same enlightenment if you dare to pick up this novel. Lullabies for Little Criminals was unlike any previous novel I have ever read, and will remain completely unique in its structure, raw emotion, and exposure of the reality of being a young girl down on her luck. If you take anything from this pitch, I hope that it has at least sparked a flicker of curiosity, and that you make the choice to be uncomfortable in the name of furthering your awareness. I truly believe that you will not regret it, and there is something for pretty much anyone to take from Baby's story.